Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast, the go-to place to gain financial freedom through real estate investing. Here we interview investors, mentors, and entrepreneurs who share their secrets and advice to help you build passive income. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, it's Augustino. A big part of maintaining a portfolio of multifamily buildings is the execution of the property as a landlord. The effective performance of a property is crucial not only to your own success as a real estate entrepreneur, but also your ability to deliver on your promise to your investors. So running your property is tremendously important. So today's guest has managed $40 million worth of real estate as a managing broker of his own firm. He sits on numerous corporate boards and is the CEO of Landlord Coach, a mentoring program for landlords and property managers based out of Lafayette, Indiana. He's also authored a book, The Time Wealthy Investor, Your Real Estate Roadmap to Owning More, Working Less, and Creating the Life You Want. With all that, I'd like to welcome Mark Dolfini to the show. Hey, Mark, thanks for coming on.
It is truly my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So before we go on, if you like what Mark has to say, you can reach him via his website at landlordcoach.com or on Facebook at Facebook/landlordcoach. So, okay, Mark, maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and how you got into the business.
Well, I started, it seems like 100 years ago now that I've been doing this, but I got into the real estate world back in my 20s, in my 40s now, but it's hard to believe I've been doing anything professionally for that long. But I started, my first piece of real estate was 40 acres in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. And I bought it for a couple $100 an acre. I was like, well, surely I can make money on that. And I was right. I did okay. About 10, 15 years later, I think I sold it. I don't remember exactly. About doubled my money. And I thought, man, this is really great. But really when I first got my start in real estate was when I left in the Marines. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. And I got out, came to Purdue to get an education. And when I got to Purdue, I started buying rental properties. And that's where I really got started. So by the time my 4 years was done at Purdue, I had a degree in accounting and I had about $500,000 worth of real estate that I'd accumulated at that point. So I was buying properties while I was in school.
Nice. Good. So when you were buying these properties while you're at school, like how did you actually do that? Were you using your own cash? Were you raising money? Like how did you go about that?
Well, I started educating myself in terms of how the banks were loaning money. And, it's very easy to get lured into the OPM thought, other people's money. And I've heard it. I get it. I am definitely different now, having gone through what I went through in 2008 and 2009, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I was looking at the way the banks were underwriting. I got interested in banking. I learned about everything from front end to back end to from front end ratios and back end ratios and how they were underwriting, and just basically showed them what they wanted to see and didn't give them any reason to decline me. So I got very good at being very creative in terms of borrowing money and leveraging and that sort of thing. So getting into the real estate was not really the challenge. The challenge is it's like sitting at the roulette table. It's not hard to win. It's hard to keep. So that's the problem. Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I think everybody's so focused on the sexy part of the acquisition thing, where we're going off looking at properties, we're making some evaluations on what it's going to take to turn it around or whatever related to that part of it. But once you got it, now what do you do with it? And that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, yeah, just like I said at the opening, getting it is one thing, but delivering on the promises is huge. And it probably sounds like that's where you really got your kickoff with your coaching business.
Yeah. So it was funny. As I got into and started climbing into deeper and deeper into the hole, I got into, after I graduated from college, I went and worked for the Marriott for a few years, and Marriott is just a wonderful company to work for. And it was great because they were truly, I was learning how to run a business in terms of how to treat people. And I really learned a lot of the things from the hospitality industry and how to operate my real estate business. And they treat people really well. They really do well by the customer. And even to the point of almost a fault where I think like, just push back a little bit. But that's not what the Marriott was about. They really were about taking care of their employees, taking care of their clients. And I did take a lot away from that industry just because of the way that the way that they treated people and with respect and dignity. So when I went and started climbing in deeper in the hole, and 9/11 was a big thing for me because I grew up in upstate New York. So I was in a job where I was in accounting. I was good at it, but just because I was good at it, I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy pushing paper from one side of the table to the other and dealing with the same problems and so forth. So I remember very distinctly sitting at my desk and hearing that the buildings had fallen down. And I couldn't get my head around that. I thought, no, that can't be possible. This is a skyline that I grew up seeing from time to time. I grew up in upstate New York, but I would go to the city, and those are my favorite buildings to see just because they were just so elegant and sleek, and they were gone. And I got thinking about the people that were unfortunately jumping out of the building. And I'm thinking, how many of those poor people were going to a job for the last time, going to a job that they didn't like, leaving the people that they love behind, going to a job that they didn't like. And I thought, no more. I need to value my time better. And it was really the first real impetus for me to start moving and doing this full time. So I got out. I had about 30 or so rental units at that point in time, spending a lot of time at work dealing with non-work issues. I refer to that as undertime, versus overtime. If you're working more than you should, but I was definitely working, taking that time away, stealing away from, taking out and handling phone calls and that sort of stuff. And that's very, very stressful because you're not focused. So I decided to go out and do that full time. I was not super happy doing what I was doing, but I did. I went out, and it wasn't too much longer after that I got to within a year or two, I was at 92 rental units, and that was the pinnacle of how high I got in the unit count in my rental business.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, you know what, and that's one of the things that I push at our live events is the freedom you get from running your own portfolio and spending time with the people that you want to spend time with. Building your own wealth as opposed to, just like you said, going to a place that they probably didn't like. We don't know if everyone enjoyed their job or not, but yeah, it makes for a very different lifestyle when you can control your own time and control your own future. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for me because where the wheels came off the wagon for me was in 2008 and 2009 when things started to get really, really bad. And I had this $6 million portfolio, was generating around $65,000 a month in cash flow. And my life was the definition of hell. It was truly awful. And I worked anywhere from 18 to 20-hour days, day after day, 7 days a week, with really no end in sight. And that's when things really started to get bad.
Yeah. But now with your business, with Landlord Coach, so maybe you can talk about that transition. So when you founded the company, did you create your own systems, processes? Did you buy them from somewhere and customize them? How'd you actually put all that together?
Well, it really came out of more of a necessity than anything else, because what I didn't tell part of the story was that I nearly lost everything I had. And in the 2008, 2009 recession, it really wasn't a real estate problem as much as it was a problem with the labor markets. I mean, the labor markets fell apart, and real estate had been bad for 8 months before people were getting on the MSNBC was saying, oh, it's really starting to get bad out there in the foreclosure market. I'm like, where have you been? It's been horrible for 8 months. And I remember very distinctly the first month that I really noticed it. And I felt that I had ample reserves, in terms of cash, but this $65,000 a month went to about $30,000 a month after month after month. And I couldn't weather that storm. I don't think anybody could weather that storm, and just how long it went on. So evidently, what ended up happening was I started losing properties. I started getting foreclosure notices. I couldn't pay the mortgages. It got so bad. I ended up losing about $4.5 million worth of real estate. So
wow.
It did get bad for me. I lost my house, my car, but it didn't get truly bad until I got sick. And because I was working and trying to work even harder, and I was working 24 and 30-hour days, and I got sick. I got a cold, and I was thinking, okay. I did the right thing. I went to the doctor, and I was like, okay, cool. Went to the doctor. He said, get some rest. Okay, rest. Sure. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, the irony there, it almost killed me because I ended up getting double pneumonia, and I did almost die. I went to the hospital, and they left me in this triage room, which they didn't was a new hospital, so they weren't quite up to snuff in terms of how the whole thing went, the intake process went. And they left me alone in that room, and I couldn't get off the table. I was just literally laying there on the table, gulping for air like a fish out of water. And remember my eyes closing. I was getting hypoxic. And I just got very euphoric, like, oh, okay, this is how I'm going to go out. All right. Just, and if you know anything about hypoxia, that's how it happens, right? You just kind of go to sleep. And I came back to a level of awareness when someone came back in the room, but I was very, very in a very bad place. And it wasn't until all that happened that I realized that something in my world had to change. And of course, I would love to say I had this Jerry Maguire moment and then everything was amazing after that. Well, that's not how life is generally. So it took me a while. It took me a while to figure this out. But what I boiled it down to was three basic things. First and foremost, I did not have a very clear vision for my future. I just kept getting more rental units because I thought more was better, right? And I had this discussion all the time especially with property managers, but a lot of times with individual investors as well, is that I'll say to them, well, I'm at 10 units now and I really want to get to 100. And I'm like, God, no, you don't. Like, that's just, you really want to deal with 100 families and 100 toilets and 100 furnaces? Like, do you really want, like, they don't understand the level of complexity that goes on with that. And it's like, and I'll even challenge them. I'll say, like, you want 100? Why not 101? Why not, a million zillion? Like, what's such a nebulous number? Like, why is that important? It ultimately, at the end of the day, this whole concept of vision, it's not about the 100 rental units. It's about they want the life output that they think 100 rental units will buy for them, right? And this is such a higher calling for me to pass along this message of having a rock solid vision for your future that's about life output and not about some nebulous number that you come up with that says, oh, I want 100 rental units. Because when you sacrifice where you can't go to a friend's funeral, or you can't go to the birth of someone's child, or you can't do certain things, you can't be there for that sick parent, or you can't be there or even just to go on vacation or to do some real cool things, and use that time wealth that you have to really get to the things that you want to do in life. I mean, no one gets into rental properties going, you know what? I've got way too much free time on my hands on the weekends, and I really don't want to see my friends and family anymore. So I'm going to do that, right? I say that tongue in cheek, but that's exactly what happens, right?
Yep, that's exactly it.
So first and foremost, I had to get really clear on my vision for the future. Once I got that clarity, which at this point was just mere survival, then I developed an infrastructure around that vision. Now, that infrastructure is just I was very, very broke, but I was still clear about the infrastructure pieces that I was building. Now, infrastructure is different things, different people, but basically it's the bones of your business, right? I needed to stop treating this like a side hustle. I needed to stop being self-employed, and I needed to start acting like a business owner. So I needed to make infrastructure purchases like property management software. Now, I don't care if you've got 5 units or 50 units, you need property management software. I needed a website. I needed that integrated with the property management software. I needed an office. I needed desks and chairs and stuff like that, right? That's all infrastructure. And the reason why I needed to have vision first is because when I put my infrastructure in place, I needed that to be in alignment with my vision. And I'll give you a quick example in terms of for your listeners. If your vision for your future is to spend 2 months out of the year laying on a beach rubbing cocoa butter on your belly, I respect that. Right? That's great. It's a great vision. Okay. But if your infrastructure is set up to where you have to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, that's not going to work out very well for you at all if your vision is to lay on the beach. Right? So you have to have your vision clear, or as clear as you can when you're putting your infrastructure in place. Okay. Then finally is the P portion. That's the process. And the process portion is the rules upon which you'll operate. If you think of infrastructure as the train tracks, process is the train. Process is the protocols, the rules, like if you're charging rent on the first, it's how you're actually going to get that rent to you. Are you going to accept checks? Are you going to accept cash? Payment through the website, stuff like that. So that's the rules, the procedures, and protocols. So when I climbed out of that hole and when I wrote The Time Wealthy Investor, in fact, I'm getting ready to release the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, which basically lines it out exactly as in that process, which is VIP, which is vision, infrastructure, and process.
Nice. Excellent. So I'm assuming then your program goes through all that. I mean, it sounds like something for a beginner, basically, someone who might have even become an accidental landlord, just started buying 10, 15, 20 houses, but they don't really know what else to do with it afterwards. They're kind of like going with the flow. And it's funny how it goes hand in hand with some of the things that I do in my live events as well. People just show up and I want to have 100 units. Well, who's going to manage it? Oh, I don't have a manager. They're doing it all themselves, just taking all the phone calls, and they have a vision for being independently wealthy, yet there is no mechanism to support it. It's funny. So, but anyway, how does your program work then? So if somebody were to sign up, is that your basic process what you just described?
Yeah, I do coaching, individual coaching. I do group coaching. I also do seminars as well. I've got an event coming up. I haven't ironed out all the details just yet, but it'll be in the spring. But it's going to be something where if people are coming to me, they're going to learn. I mean, the basics of it, the way that I can say this is that this is a business course. It's a course about business. It's about how to run a real estate business that does not take all of your time to operate. A business course, basically creating a business that doesn't run you. And I'd been in business for 10 years before I started learning about all this stuff and a lot of it is the granular, not sexy basics, where it's going to be, okay, let's talk about property management software and let's get into the details on that and what that all looks like. So it's going to really bring into, and you can read about it in the book, but really, I really think that people need a coach. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be their coach, but they really need to have a coach that's going to help them implement these things along the way, because it's so easy to get distracted, especially in real estate, right? I mean, how many people do you know that you walk up to and say, oh, how do you keep busy? What is it that you do? And you're like, well, I do some wholesaling. I do some flipping. I've got some rentals. I'm thinking about doing some Airbnb. And you're like, oh my gosh. And it's like, oh yeah. And I sell some oils too out of the trunk of my car. You're like, oh man, you're giving me diabetes just talking to you, right? So
yeah, the importance of focus. So important.
Absolutely. And a good coach will call you on the carpet when you are wandering off into the woods too far. And again, I'm not the coach for everybody. It's just not one size fits all. But, if you have a coach that you're currently working with, this course really works well as an overlay. If you have a certain way you like doing business, I'm not going to tell you to stop doing business this specific way. If it's something that you enjoy and you do that sort of thing, that's fine. This is really about setting up the basics of a business that don't take a ton of money and a ton of time to operate. So you can get out there and do the things that you enjoy. Maybe you do enjoy the real estate side of things, like making the deal, but you probably hate dealing with the contractor side of things. Or maybe if you are managing rentals, managing that side of things. I mean, there's ways that you can systematize and automate a lot of this stuff, or just simply delegate it to someone else.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Some people are better at some things than others. And some of their visions are not the same either. Some people may have the jet set vision with the condo in Miami, and others just want to be at home and they're in the Midwest, somewhere on a lake.
Right. And everywhere in between, and raising their kids and spending time with grandkids, and maybe even starting a family. Or even if you're single, just being able to have more free time to spend with your friends and maybe go out and be more intentional about finding someone that you can spend your life with. I mean, this is real stuff. This is not some pie in the sky 10x, 10x your revenue. I mean, how about 10xing your life? I mean, how about that? How about life output? And that's really where it is, where I am really, really lucky, where I get to spend a lot of time. Like last Sunday, I was super, super excited because I got to spend, a whole day with my 10-year-old son. He's been, out of the blue said, "Hey, Dad, let's go shooting." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I like to shoot. I'm a big shooter. So we were going out and he wanted to do that. And I was thinking, okay, that's great. And we got to spend a whole day doing it. It's a beautiful day here in the Midwest, which is rare in October. So I'm like, absolutely. I don't care what we do as long as we're outside. My older son, he was chilling out at home doing his thing. And it's rare that I get to spend that much time with him individually one-on-one. My wife, she was at home, just chilling out too. And I spent the day with my youngest, and just making the world safe from paper zombies. It was great.
Excellent. So, but it sounds like a big part of it is of the three things you outlined. The first is vision, and so how do you implement vision, or how do you recommend that people do that first? Do you do vision boards? Do you use affirmations? How do you do it?
Well, oftentimes and there's a specific process I bring them through, but oftentimes it's really about, they have to start with what they don't want, because it usually starts that way. It's like, well, I don't want to work for this company for the rest of my life, if they've got a day job, or, almost always it starts that way. So it's like, okay, that's fine if you need to have a list of things that you don't want, but I don't want to make it a negative list, because it's almost like, when you have a list of, it's like going to a shop. It's like going to a grocery store with a list of all the things that you don't want to buy. Right. So if you have on your list of bread, milk, and eggs, because that's what you don't want, well, guess what you're going to see when you go to the store? All over, you're going to see bread, milk, and eggs. So it's kind of like when your friend buys a new car and he's got this blue Toyota, right? You're going to see blue Toyotas just like that all over town. Like, oh, that's I saw, oh, no, well, that's why I want them to frame about in terms of what they do want. So I needed them to get very, very clear in terms of what that is. And generally, the way that I have them do it is simply to write it down. And they write it, and I have them write it down every single day. And when you start writing that vision down every day, and it's easy to do and easy not to do, this is why you need a coach. Again, it doesn't have to be me, but someone that's going to hold you accountable to it. Because when you start writing that down, a couple things happen. First and foremost, when you're writing that vision down, you are, after a while of you writing down that you want to buy a jet ski, all of a sudden you're going to start to feel a little ridiculous if that's really not what you want. Because you may realize, okay, you thought that you wanted a jet ski, but what ends up happening is you don't want a jet ski. You want the time to be able to go and operate a jet ski.
That's right.
Because owning a jet ski is kind of a headache, right? You have to have a place for it and take care of it and all that. But you can rent a jet ski, or maybe co-own one with someone else, and you have access to it whenever you want. Okay, cool. Maybe that's what you really want, but it's really not about the jet ski. It's about having that time freedom to go do that. So when you start writing that stuff down, and after about 14 times of writing it down, you go, you know what? I really don't believe in this that much. But you start writing it down, and all of a sudden that vision is going to evolve for you. And then when you continue on, when you start getting further and further down the road, you're going to start seeing that, hey, you know what though? I remember a long time ago, I had this thought of going to space camp, or whatever. I don't know, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you start writing that vision down, because it's starting to crop up. Things that are important starting to crop up for you. But here's the really amazing thing is when you write that vision down, all of a sudden your daily activity starts aligning towards that vision. Yep. Because you're going to start to take ownership of it. Your subconscious is going to start to take ownership of it. Your daily activities are going to start to take ownership of it. And again, when you're working with someone that's going to tell you, hey, this is, are you operating? Are you getting closer to your vision? It's kind of like those people who have the 5-year plan, where the 5 years, but where the clock never starts. Oh, that's part of my 5-year plan. That's part of my 5-year plan. I'm like, dude, you're 40. You got this 5-year plan. 27. When's this going to happen? That's the thing is all of a sudden time gets away from you because you never actually start the clock. So that's why I would say, writing it down, and I don't know what, maybe some psychologist that's got way bigger brains than me. I'm a pretty simple guy, but when you write this down, something happens between your pen and that paper in your brain. Something happens. And I don't know if it's about ownership. I don't know if it's about just putting it out there to the world, but I'm telling you, it's something big, and it's a very simple way to do it. And just that simple act of writing it every day is a real way to take ownership of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually do the same thing. I actually write it in present tense. So I own 1,000 units. I talk about my income and all that fun stuff too. Right. It's writing it in present. It activates the reticular activating system. That's what it is. And what you pointed out earlier, it's if you say you really want that blue Bentley, you look around, you're going to see blue Bentleys everywhere, even in a place like Ohio. We're in Indiana.
The mecca of Bentley, exactly.
So now another aspect you discussed was around processes and getting the software, the infrastructure, and that component. So how do you recommend people do that part of it as far as the process is concerned? Do you already have processes already outlined? Is this something you recommend they figure out on their own? Like how do you do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to plug my wares, but I mean, if they come, we set up infrastructure that's in alignment with their vision. And that's going to be really, really important because the infrastructure piece, again, you have to think of train tracks. It's not super easy to tear up train tracks and set them down somewhere else, even if it's just moving them 10 feet over to the right, which is almost worse. It's then completely changing them, which is why you have to be very, very intentional, very deliberate about the type of infrastructure you're putting in place, which is, if you're putting property management software in place or accounting software, or, even bringing on the certain professionals in your world that are going to be members of your team. If you've got your attorneys, you've got your CPAs, your general contractors, your handymen, those sorts of people that you're bringing on into your team. You want to make sure that you're very intentional, very deliberate about thinking all that process through. But when it comes to process, again, it's going to be up to the individual, because here's the thing, I'm really good at maintenance. There's not much I can't fix. Now, it's been, years since I've laid under a dishwasher, but I can still probably fix, most things. I enjoy that stuff. The problem is it's not the highest and best use of my time. My time now is worth several $100s per hour. Does it make sense for me to make $50 an hour laying under a dishwasher? Well, maybe if it's something because I truly enjoy fixing dishwashers, which I don't, but I don't hate it. But it's not the highest and best use of my time anymore. So if I'm going to make money, if I'm truly going to make money, then I have to make sure that my activities are aligned towards what's best use of my time. So if you've got a guy out there who really likes to work with his hands and fix stuff, and maybe he wants to keep the maintenance component, so therefore you design that process, you design that infrastructure and that process around him still doing the maintenance stuff. But he doesn't really like doing the rent collection stuff. Okay, fine. So you set up that infrastructure and you set up that process so you have a virtual assistant or somebody else that's going to be handling the collections side for them. And really, it's not about, here's the thing that really frustrates me is that if you're listening to this and you take nothing else away from this in terms of the rent collection process, it's not about being hardcore. It's not about being mean. It's not about being anything. It's about being systematic. It's about being process oriented. Like, you would not go into, let me put it this way. Does McDonald's have a collections problem? Like, you go to a McDonald's restaurant. Does McDonald's have a collections problem? No, because they're not going to give you a cheeseburger until you've paid for it, right? It is built into the process, right? It's simple. I know it's super basic, but it's like, well, these people don't have possession of they already have the possession of the property. Yes, but it's systematic. It's built into the system. So if you having someone calling up and saying, and really a good collections agent is really, really, really good at sales. A good collections agent is a good salesperson. That is a fact, because they have to convince that individual to part with their money for rent versus paying for something else. Even if it means their kids' books or, their Netflix thing or whatever it is, they have to convince them of that and say, hey, I really want you, you call up and act like a jerk. Well, you can't be surprised if they're going to act like a jerk back to you, right? If you're not treating them well by not maintaining the property well, what are you expecting? They're giving you the same level of respect that you're giving them. So
that's right.
Really it's process driven.
Yeah, that's right. People pay people. That's how it works, And if you treat them like a person, they'll pay you. It's simple as that. Yeah,
it really is. Right. Yeah, what I teach isn't overly complex, but it is customizable to the individual based on their personal skill set and what they like to do. So if you're getting somebody that is, really not good at maintenance or just doesn't enjoy that side of things, then fine. It can be very much tailored to the individual and what their skill set is.
Right. So something you just touched on as far as collections is concerned. So you mentioned a VA. So it sounds like one of the methods you might use is to use a VA to say, follow up if a tenant does not pay. And would they also handle, say, evictions, or not even evictions, a 3-day notice even before that, and then evictions? Is that typically how you systematize things?
Yep, it's all part of the process. So in that particular case, you create a checklist for that virtual assistant to use in that particular arena. So now, because the calendar days don't always land exactly, and everybody's got different levels of when they initiate the collections process. I have always had a 3-day grace period, just because I'm not trying to find ways to beat people out of their money, but I also wanted to give people, make it palatable for them. I know landlords that give no grace period. That's fine. I'm not going to beat them up for it. That's what they're used to, and that's their process. Mm-hmm. But if you have a 3-day grace period, okay, so on day 3, and assuming day 3 doesn't land on a weekend or a holiday, then you initiate the collections process on the following business day. So that collections agent or that virtual assistant opens up their calendar, and it's the 5th. And the 4th happened to be a holiday, And, that was a Monday. So that Tuesday, they're going to start their day one collection, right? And these are the conversations. They'll send out emails and then that sort of thing. So, they initiate the process and then the process just keeps going down from there. And then if they need to initiate legal action, they're keeping you in the loop in terms of all the stuff that's going on. But again, it's just you looking at metrics and saying, okay, I've got 90% of my rent collected. I got 92% of my rent collected. Okay, who are my bottom 8%? And then you start looking at those and go, okay, do we have workouts in place? Like these are the sorts of things where you have to have it all process driven.
Nice.
Because where people get very frustrated is they're trying to adjust behavior without addressing process. And it's the tail wagging the dog. So you really need to make sure that you're addressing process first. Because imagine what it is like. And if we've got time here real quick, I'll give you a quick analogy.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. And when you go to a McDonald's, okay, and we've all experienced this, okay? And McDonald's is amazing at what they do. If you think about the volume of food that any one particular restaurant puts out, you're like, it blows your mind. But they do sometimes have problems of infrastructure. And I'll give you a quick example. Have you ever gone into a McDonald's where there's maybe just pretend that there's 3 registers that are open, okay? And as you go up to the register, there's customers standing back, like no one's in line, but everybody's kind of back, like, some are reading the menu, some look like they're having conversations, and you walk up and you're not sure who's next in line, right? Can you picture that? Where you look at the guy and you go, can I go? Should you go? Right? You're having that kind of discussion. That right there is a dead giveaway that they have a problem of infrastructure. Because who's deciding who's next in line? The customer is deciding who's next in line. And that's a problem, because if you're having that level of confusion, then it can be simply fixed by installing a queue, like a rope line. You install a metal queue, you don't have to bolt it into the floor, but you can install a rope line where people walk in, and now that problem is largely handled. That's infrastructure. When infrastructure is working, it's hardly noticeable. That's the problem with infrastructure, is when it's working well, it's hard to notice. When it's either when it's broken or missing that you realize that there's a problem. And that's a deal with infrastructure.
That's right. So now to dig a little deeper on the VA. So it sounds like the VA is accounting for all your rents to try to hit the 100% mark. Mm-hmm. What sort of software do you typically use for something like that? Are you using like one of the like AppFolio or one of these other guys, or are you doing something a little different?
I know AppFolio is very popular. I like something that's a little bit more customizable. Personally, I use Property Boss, but I also like PropertyWare. Both of those are very, very customizable to the point where they are, most people don't like them because they're really hard to, set up. But I promise you, once you get that set up and you really don't have to mess with it again, it is a very, very robust program. I don't get anything for plugging them. You can check them out, don't check them out. It doesn't make a difference to me. But when you're looking at more basic type programs like Buildium, like AppFolio, even Yardi has Breeze now, which is a entry level product for them. They're all okay. They're all better than nothing. And even like NTN Online, National Tenant Network, they have a free version of property management software. I do plug because it's free and they give really good tenant screening information. Those data are very timely and very relevant. So, if you're using Excel spreadsheets now, I would just say stop it and please go to something. Even though AppFolio is not what I like, but they are good. And I know some property management companies that I work with that do use AppFolio, and they're knocking the cover off the ball. So I'm not going to tell you to not use it just because I don't like it. It just doesn't work for me and for what I like, for the level of detail of information. But, when you have that VA calling, they're going to be pulling it up, working through the cloud, having access to different data that they can pull and say, okay, well, this individual, these 10 individuals haven't paid rent yet. So we're going to, I'm going to continue on or initiate the collections process with them. So that's how that virtual assistant is going to be working. And that's where the checklist is going to start.
Yes. I think most people also miss the mark is those guys that are using Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets or whatever. They are hurting themselves because they are actually reducing the overall valuation of that property that they currently own, right? So if you can demonstrate you have a multifamily deal, you have 100 units, and you're trying to manage all the spreadsheets. I don't know who in the right mind would do it, but it happens.
I did it. I did it for a long time back when I had 30 plus units, and it was absolutely maddening.
Right. But when you go to unload it, right? You go to unload it. What are you going to do? Hand them a bunch of spreadsheets? I mean, that actually happens. So there's deals that I look at. There's still like spreadsheets and photocopies and stuff like that. It's crazy, but you can't verify the numbers. So it's going to have an impact on your overall valuation. Absolutely. Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah. I even had a property manager here locally that was still up to very, very recently. And they had they had several hundred units that they were managing for other people, and they were managing on an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm thinking, man, that's fine for one or two properties. But I mean, I would even make the argument that even if you've got one or two properties, that you're just going to be so much more effective and efficient that, by having that piece of infrastructure in place and enjoyable. I mean, that's the 3 E's for me, efficient, effective, and enjoyable, because, even when you have a vacancy, you hit move out automatically, that property is getting marketed out to the syndicated websites. So most property management software does that now, where you don't even have to mess with it. And you're like, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I can have something that automated where I don't have to go and upload pictures, and I mean, the pictures are already uploaded in there and all of that stuff and the description and everything else, and you don't have to upload that every single time, man, what a time saver that is.
Yeah.
And even if you've only got a handful of units, you can't scale unless you've got that stuff in place.
Absolutely. So now when it comes to finding contractors, another important aspect of landlording, how are you doing that today? How do you find those guys?
Well, we're always on the hunt. And it's not because we have some amazing vendors that we work with, but life happens. And sometimes it's a one-man operation and they are really, really good at fixing washers and dryers. And sometimes they get sick and they're not able to do their job anymore, especially with handymen. A good handyman, you want to hide that phone number from anybody. If someone calls you and said, "You have a good handyman?" Nope. Just like that, a babysitter. I do not. Nope. My babysitter usually shows up drunk, and when she does, it's usually all the time. You just don't tell. I'm talking, tongue in cheek, of course, but you hide that information because I'll tell you, a good handyman is really, really hard to find, and they will get so busy that they stop answering their phone.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, you really do have to continue to educate yourself. I sit on the board for the NFIB, which is the National Federation of Independent Business here in Indiana, and also the Better Business Bureau in Central Indiana. So I have two really good mechanisms for me to get in contact with local businesses that are in my area that are dialed in, that see the benefit of being accredited. I'm also in a BNI chapter. I don't know if it's a networking group, which also gives me lots of opportunity to reach out to other people that are, in the electrician's field or HVAC field or plumbing or, disaster recovery, whatever, that sort of stuff. So it really is about networking. And that's a whole other probably conversation for another time. But just make sure that you're out and always looking for the opportunity to expand your network with the vendors that you currently have, and don't ever rest. If you've been in this business for more than 20 minutes, you'll know how quickly people will come into the cleaning business and then out of the cleaning business.
Yeah, that's right. So when you were talking about 9/11, one of the things that happened at about the same time was the 2008 crash, right? It's a little bit later, of course, but I think that really did not help the economy in any way. But are you seeing any sort of indications compared to what it was back then to what you're seeing now? Do you see any slowdowns happening economic-wise? And how important is landlording now that if you do see things tightening up a little bit?
I see it tightening up in the multifamily market, especially the higher end stuff. That's because it just seemed like there was this mad rush to get into multifamily. And everybody was doing it. And I'm not knocking it. I've been more of a single family guy, but I do have some multifamily stuff in my own portfolio and in stuff that I manage. But I do see that's where it's starting to slow down. Now, I don't think there's going to be the crash. I do see the flattening of rents coming up. I don't see that they're and I've talked to other experts and they see the same things. They're saying that it's going to be more like there might be a dip. There might be as much as a 5 to 10%, correction. But I don't really see that. I don't have any empirical data to back those up. But what I would say specifically, I do see a flattening of the rents happening in the multifamily market. And that's why it's going to be that much more important now. If you're going to make your money now, make sure you're banking it, make sure you're setting up that infrastructure and that process. It's even going to be more important now to make sure that stuff is set up. There's one thing that tells me that I'm not going to see a bottoming out of the market like it happened back in 08 and 09. There's no oversupply. And somebody had pointed that out to me, and I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I don't see an oversupply of housing that's out there. I just see a weakening of demand. So that's the difference why I don't see that there's going to be a crash like there was in '08, because there's no oversupply. But that does not mean that there's not going to be a correction. If you're aware of the 18-year real estate cycle, we're kind of at the end of the correction. You're right. We're at the end of the 7 to 10-year run. It's been a good run, but we are due for a flattening out or at least a slight correction in the market.
Yeah. I would imagine that having your processes in place and having your ability to manage your portfolio of real estate is critical. I mean, it's critical already as it is today. It becomes even more critical when there is that softening of the market, because you really have to keep your tenants happy.
Absolutely. And that's why it's going to be that much more important to build that goodwill with them now. And when things do go sideways and you'll say, hey, you know what? Instead of a rent increase this year, I'm going to keep your rent the same, even though everybody around you is doing rent decreases. Because once you lose that resident, trying to get a new resident in, they're going to want the store. And if you don't have to give away the store because you've treated them well and you've given them opportunities to treat them fairly. And, I just think that that's going to be, again, if you're operating like a business, if you're being systematic and you're treating them well, that's the main thing. You don't have to gush over them and mail out birthday cards and all that other stuff. If you're not doing the basics, then don't worry about that extra stuff. Just make sure that you're providing them a good service at a good price, and they'll stay loyal to you.
Yep, absolutely. So how about if we go into the mogul round?
Okay, I'm ready.
Ready? Excellent. All right.
I feel like, do I need a buzzer? Do I need a lightning round stuff?
No. No, you won't need any of that stuff. Just good, solid answers. That's it. That's it. So,
I think I can do that.
All right, excellent. So, if you can give your 20-year-old self a word of advice, what would you tell him?
Value your time more. Easily. Value your time. Learn to value your time more. I don't feel that I didn't do a good job of that when I was 20. I certainly didn't do a good job when I was 30, 40. I'm starting to figure it out. And if I can go back, I would say learn to value your time more. Easily.
Yes. So what are your 3 most influential books and why?
Wow. Okay. So business books, I'm assuming. So we'll go with E-Myth by Michael Gerber, far and away one of my best books. The Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. That was an easy one. And then I'd have to say the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Interesting. All right. Good. Yeah, that one comes up a lot. Yeah.
That was a game changer for me in learning to value my time. And it was, I think Tim's a sociopath, but he's brilliant. And I would say that to him. I don't know him well. I don't know him at all. I'm not even saying we're connected, but I don't know him. But I would say that to him, and he probably would go, "Yeah, I am." But he's brilliant. He's an absolutely brilliant guy, and there's not much to be lost in the lesson there. But I learned an awful lot from his book.
I noticed that in the last 2 questions, you really reflect on valuing of time. It's actually in the title of your book too, right? The valuing of time. And I think that time, when you're younger, you don't value it as much because you think it's abundant and you have tons of it, as opposed to what the reality is. I mean, there's a lot of time if you use it wisely. So what do the next 5 years look like for your business?
Well, in my real estate business, I'm in cash accumulation mode. I am hoarding cash. And I know I'm not one of those that says, oh, there's no deals out there. I don't like being a motivated buyer. So I really just want to sit on my cash because I know that I'll be very happy that I did. And banks love cash. And, I don't want to have to rely on them to loan me money when things are tight. But if I'm sitting on a pile of cash, it makes it a lot easier for them to say yes and leverage some deals that maybe would make sense at that point in time. So right now I'm hoarding cash and just waiting for the market conditions to be more favorable to buying.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Good. So, all right, Mark. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, guys. If you want to follow with Mark, you can reach out to him at his contact page on landlordcoach.com. I'll include the links to his book in the description as well. Did you say you had another book that you wanted to give away as well?
I do. And what I just want to make sure that for your listeners, that if you just go to landlordcoach.com/bulletproof, I'm going to have a free download for I've got the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0 is getting ready to release very, very soon. It's like very ready. It's very ready to get published. I'm waiting on a couple of very small things to get finished up on it. But I am giving away to your listeners, if you go to landlordcoach.com/bulletproof, a free copy, an ebook, which is called The Judge. And it may be something that it's a fast read. It might be something that some of your readers can definitely dial into.
Excellent. Great. We'll include the link to that as well. I hope you guys got a lot of insight on how important landlording is. And it's so important to making your business a success. So thanks again for your time. I really, really appreciate it, Mark.
It's been truly my pleasure. Thanks so much for the time, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. For more free podcasts, articles, videos, and resources, go to www.bulletproofcashflow.com.